storage is cheap, typically, if you're hosting your site somewhere, but bandwidth is where it costs more money. So the less you can serve, the better. It's going to be cheaper.
So what Bootstrap does for you is it's a framework of a bunch of CSS classes that you can just include in your style sheet, and it will format it for you. So it's done a lot of the work for you to make your life easier. So for instance, if I have this right here and add a few classes, just like that, and you'll see that it didn't change much. You'll see it once I'm done.
The other good thing with Bootstrap is if you only like certain portions of the Bootstrap library, then you can actually tick the particular points that you want. So let's say I just want their drop-down bar. Then I can actually download just the drop-down bar CSS and just use that. So you're not kind of constrained to using their entire package or anything like that.
Frameworks now, Walmart's doing that.
Oh, okay, so yes, the slide that we're on now is JavaScript frameworks. We're not actually using it. Very popular nowadays are Angular and Backbone somewhat and Ember somewhat. I think most popular right now is Angular. It's kind of I've been using it for the past couple of days. It's kind of a love-hate relationship. It's pretty strong in some ways, but there's a lot of magic going on in the back. All these frameworks, they kind of have the MVC model for your front end. So that's basically what they're for. Kind of organizes your code a bit better.
So it's starting to look much better.
Somewhat. You don't have your default button anymore.
Yeah. So by adding a bunch of Bootstrap classes, like if you were to do this traditionally using just HTML and raw CSS, you'll be pulling your hair with the margins, the paddings, the heights, the sizes, etc. So it just makes your life easier.
And then another thing about Bootstrap is it makes your site automatically responsive as well. So if you use Bootstrap, you can automatically
there you go.
resize to a mobile, a tablet, or whatever you want. They also have columns and like a lot of layout options. So when I was doing a lot of web work, I found it really frustrating just laying it out and spending a lot of time on that and spending much less time actually developing the actual app and the logic in the code. So this really kind of helps you get something up quickly and not have to worry about all the front end stuff that goes on.
And what's next for the site?
Source control. So, sure. How many people know what source control is? Okay. So once, in university, it was not mentioned at all when I was here, and you get hit with it as soon as you get out, because the projects that you work on sometimes are really big, and there's a lot of people working on them at the same time. So what people have done is come up with something called source control, and that allows you to keep revisions of your files and go back to those if you need to. And there's a whole bunch of different kinds. If you're looking for something free and very popular, then GitHub, which is based around Git, which was a technology developed by Linus, and as well, Bitbucket is also based around Git. Git is kind of like a distributed source control system. So the idea being that you save everything on your computer, and your computer holds the whole kind of history, and you can easily push commits to a server, and you can have it listed on the server, and then someone else can download it from the server, and they have the whole history as well.
Just real quick, another example of Bootstrap. Here I just have a link, and by just adding a button class, and let's make it large, and let's choose the default button styling, you will have a button. That's what Bootstrap does.
So GitHub though is free for open source projects. Bitbucket is free you can have free private repos up to like 5 gigabytes or something. But GitHub is probably, they've just done a better job of the front end, and they give you a lot more tools.
I would hope a lot of you guys are using Git now for your CS degree and have like a GitHub repo. So, I mean, for hiring, in a lot of companies, they will look at your GitHub. They'll look at if you're working on any personal projects, so stuff like this. Well, not exactly this project, but I mean, similar stuff, right? They want to know that you're interested in coding on your free time. And if you use GitHub, then it's easy for companies to just take a look and see what you're working on.
So there's lots of, if you're looking for something to do, there's lots of like repos that you can go and play around with, and if you have good changes, then you can submit pull requests and commit or contribute to open source projects. Yeah.
We're ready for the plan.
Okay.
So right now I'm just running on my local server, and I can give you a quick demonstration. Hello. Ask another. And you'll see that everything's persisting, and if I can fetch it here, it's coming back. So now everything's just on my computer. Now how do I make this app publicly available for you to start posing your questions? So we need to deploy it. And deployment is the next topic.
Okay. Go ahead and do this.
Sure. Okay. So yeah. So Mark's just testing locally. He has like a server like running locally, and you can access it locally. So then what you do is you just pretty much take what he has on his computer and you push it to the server and have the server host it. So Heroku is a service that kind of makes it quick and easy to do all of that, and takes care of like you can have a custom like URL and things like that. Amazon is a bit more lower level. You basically have complete control over the server, so you can pick your OS, you can pick what software is installed, anything, any kind of programs, and then you can upload your app, and then you run it.
But yeah, I was gonna say Heroku is free up to 1 dyno, they call it, and it's super simple. It's integrated very, very easily with GitHub as well. Basically, you just do git push Heroku, where you set up your remote as your Heroku URL, and then it will actually push up to the Heroku servers. It will actually detect whether it's like a Rails app, it's a Node app, and it will actually deploy it for you. Super simple.
So whereas back in the days you had to have your bare metal server set it up to days, and every time you want to do deployment you have to FTP it through and make it run, restart, etc. These days it's just a one-liner. So yeah, it'll definitely make your life so much easier.
There's also like, you guys know what like Dropbox is, right? So Dropbox is based around S3, Amazon S3, which is a simple storage. It's kind of another tool that is related, but if you, say for example, wanted to, you have a bunch of like static images on your website or something, it's cheaper to host it on S3 than it is on the actual server's hard drive. So it's just basically really cheap and easy file hosting, static file hosting. You can actually serve web pages as well, like static pages right on S3, so you actually don't even need a web server, but I digress.
We can do the.
So right now, to connect here with practice, this one line, Heroku apps create, right now what's happening somewhere in the cloud is there's this instance being spun up out of thin air, and right away it's available to us. So now we can start pushing our code into the cloud. So because we're using Redis as well, I need to add a Redis plugin called Redis to go.
So he's telling Heroku to install some software, some Redis software, the Redis drivers, basically.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about TDD? Well,
Sure. What Mark's doing now is go briefly through TDD. Who knows what TDD is?
It's always that guy.
Yeah, someone who actually knows all this stuff, or is just
He's just trolling here.
Okay, yeah. So it's test-driven development. If you go and you're applying for a company, a lot of them will actually request some knowledge of TDD. The reason for this is because if your source code gets really large, you got tens, 20s, tens of people, hundreds of people working on the same project as you are. You want to write tests for any features that you're pushing out. The reason being is because, let's say I'm working somewhere in the code source, Mark is working somewhere else, and Chris is working somewhere else as well. But he's working on a feature that actually is kind of related to my feature. Now, if I write tests for my feature, and he introduces a bug, then I could be like, Mark, what's going on, right? Like, the code that you wrote didn't pass my tests. Like, fix it. So tests are really important because it just keeps everything in line. We know that if somebody else is writing code and it doesn't pass the test, well, he must have done something to affect previous person's code or somewhere along the line, right? So a lot of companies will request that. I don't know if you guys really learn in your CS degrees test-driven development at all. Do you guys have courses for it? Like, yeah.
It integrates into the first course you ever do.
Okay.
Sort of. You require to write tests, but they're not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
It's sort of related to unit tests, but it's kind of like taking unit tests into your sort of process of software development. So for like a mobile app, say you implemented like, well, there's lots of stuff done for you on Apple and Android, but say you implemented some circular queue or something and you want to test it. You could write a unit test in your mobile project and test it kind of locally. But with web apps, like there's lots of frameworks
Right.
that allow you to write tests and then have those tests checked checked in like an automated fashion.
The really awesome thing about that isn't just that you can, blame Mark when his stuff screws up your feature, but you can also fit in something called continuous deployment or continuous integration, which is super awesome. So because deployments are so cheap, if you write automatic tests, then anytime you're done a feature, you can just push it and kind of send it off to be deployed for the world to see. And the nice thing about tests is they stop you and they stop that deployment. If you're like, whoa, guys, you failed this test here, So that's another awesome thing about that.
I just did push Heroku Master. What's happening now is all the code that we just wrote is going into the cloud. Heroku just picked it up and starting to install all the dependencies, all the things that we need, and hopefully it works. Fingers crossed. Usually it won't, especially not during live demos. But yeah.
So on the slides, you just see these are some tools that you can use for testing. For Ruby, you got RSpec. JavaScript, you got Mocha. And Capybara, we concluded that there wasn't a logo for Capybara. It's basically it's a tool. It's a tool to test front end. So for testing, like clicking on your web app or anything like that, you can use Capybara. It basically uses a Selenium WebDriver, and then through that you can just emulate a user's clicks and hovers and all that stuff. So you can test basically UX as well, right?
So this doesn't seem like it fits into a talk about startup technologies, but it's super important and super dear to my heart, and not just because it's what I do day to day. The reason this is important, and actually the reason everything we've been talking about is important, is because stuff exists out there that will save you time. And the reason this is awesome is because if you have an idea, if you have a project, if there's something that you want to do, there is stuff out there that will let you put together all the mind-numbing stuff, all the stuff you don't want to do, all the stuff that, I guess I could do, or even the stuff you get hung up on, like how big should I make that button? All that stuff you can kind of shuttle away to Bootstrap, to Heroku. I mean, that is awesome. For free. You can spin up a server and the world can see it totally for free. So the nice thing about this is actually sitting down and doing stuff is hard to do. You get there or you'll get to your computer after a class, after work, and you'll sit down and you'll think, oh geez, what am I supposed to do next? So the really awesome thing about using GitHub, which is why we're using GitHub, isn't that I'm easily distracted. It's that GitHub has issue tracking. So not only you, but your friends with you, or friends or people who are using your app can sort of ask questions, can put issues up. And what we've done, actually, so kind of a little plug here, is We use GitHub issues a lot, and we created another add-on called zenhub.io. It's a Chrome extension. Firefox is coming soon. But what it does is it kind of puts GitHub issues and organizes them in a neat little board so you can figure out what to do next super quickly. And I think we're ready to go.
Does it
So,
bring us to the Q&A?
oh, it
Awesome.
sure does. So,
Wow.
if you guys have computers, if you guys have phones,
Alright, go to
this is your
ask-
chance.
Okay, ask.axiom.heroku.com. Post your questions.
Yeah, so go ahead, give it a try.
So
Throw a
we'll
couple
give
things
you
up there.
what?
If they all go at the same time, will it
Crash?
crash one down?
Don't do funky stuff, but yeah, let's take 30 seconds.
Right, so that's a good question, right? What does one dyno mean?
That's a good question.
No, it's one instance, one magical spin-up, one unit.
Yeah, it's
of,
one
Yeah,
Heroku
yeah.
server instance, right?
Yeah, it's just one, I guess like one portion
One
of the
machine,
server.
if you will.
Yeah.
Or
It's
virtual
one like
machine.
one Heroku virtual machine. It's like
Yeah.
one they call it a dyno, a Spino dyno.
Yeah. So
And you can
another
purchase more past one, but one is free.
another awesome thing about Heroku for personal projects and for if you're thinking of kind of starting a small startup yourself is that first dyno is totally free. But the best part is if you get more traffic, if all of a sudden people start coming to your project, you can just add more dynos. That's definitely not the best way to deal with scaling, but you can add more dynos. Of course, it'll start costing.
Who is that directed to? This guy?
He's the one.
Well, now, okay, if you ask a question like that, if we have to ask you guys a question, then it kind of avoids the anonymity.
Type down specifically who won the next question. Next question.
Alright. Next question.
No.
I'm back.
Okay.
A classic. All right. Ooh, that's a good question. San Francisco web dev or Vancouver web dev?
Yeah.
There's, I think there's probably like maybe a 20% markup in San Francisco. That's kind of awesome, except you're paying San Francisco rent, you're never going to buy a house there. And food is plentiful, but a little bit more expensive than Vancouver even. Although booze is cheaper, so take that as for what it's worth. At about 5 years of experience, it depends on your stack and depends on how good you are and where you end up. So for example, if you end up web dev. Oh, okay. I was gonna say if you end up like a .NET or like a .NET developer, you'll make boatloads of money, relatively, probably like 100-ish a day. Every 5 years, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It really depends. It's all over the map.
Yeah.
So 5 years is typically like a mid-level position. 8 years is kind of like a senior. That's a big jump, I guess. You say, well, not a big jump, but a small jump from entry to mid to senior. What Nick was alluding to is that in the States, I think you pretty much get paid more. In Vancouver, actually, it's probably less than Toronto as well. In Toronto, there's a bunch of government subsidies, especially for video games. They pay like 100% of their salaries up there, where they only pay like 10% here, the government. So, but you kind of trade that with Vancouver just being awesome.
So to answer your question, depends on how good you are.
Moving on. We've got 14 questions lined up. So what is the interview process like?
Should
Yeah.
I answer that one?
No, we can. Okay, yeah. So for us at least,
Well, I guess first I want to say like what grants you the interview to begin with, and that is something that we hope to impart you with today, is that you get inspired to start building your own side projects, because that is really going to prove to us that you know your stuff.
Well, it's not. We're not just hiring you for your skills either, right? We're hiring you as a person. So, I mean, if we see that you enjoy coding on your free time, we enjoy coding on our free time, right? We would love to have, if you're part of the team, we would love you to come in and code with us on our free time. So that's really important as well.
and to answer that question more directly, first of all, it's a resume. So however you get a resume in, courier, pigeon, the internet is the usual way. We like getting to the interview process usually involves just kind of seeing what you're about and the other stuff you have out there, code reviews, just kind of a code review of the stuff you've got out there. Once you actually get an interview, we usually do a quick phone call just to see if, to weed out the weirdos, really.
If you don't pay attention.
Yeah, just to finish off that one. Yeah, usually it's a quick phone interview to weed out really quickly the people we shouldn't be spending more time on. And then after that, we bring people in for a more in-depth kind of technical interview where we have a couple light questions leading to kind of heavier, both technical questions, kind of seeing what aptitude, what your aptitude is, what drives you. And then on top of that, we usually bring people in for a third interview, which is usually like a hack session. So we'll bring people in for a couple hours because, like Eric said, working with somebody is super important to us. So being able to, come in and hack with somebody is super important. So we want to make sure that who we work with is someone we want to work with. So we usually conclude with both a hack session and then kind of like a team lunch, just to make sure that you chew with your mouth closed, I guess.
So yeah, hack session could as well be to build something like this over the course of a couple hours.
Yeah. Oh, and don't be surprised if there's like kind of like a take-home, kind of like a little code project as well. We do that most of the time too.
We don't. We trust you. Do you prefer in-depth knowledge of one technology versus intermediate knowledge of multiple?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
T-shaped.
T-shaped for sure.
Yeah.
It's shaded.
So it's good to have depth in a field, like if you know Redis inside and out. And it's also good to know how that fits into the bigger scheme and being able to build something from front to back. So whether that's a mobile app or whether that's like a web app or a game or something.
Yeah, I would probably say the latter because that implies that you're flexible. And in the realm of the startup world, technologies move so fast, you just always got to keep learning, always got to keep up with different things. Different clients have different demands, so you always need to have that thirst for knowledge.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, we always pick different tools depending on the project. There's always a different tool that works better for a different project. So in that sense, knowing multiple would be way more beneficial.
This answer is definitely more geared towards startups because you put on so many different hats all the time. It's important to be kind of like wider or T-shaped. If you're, once again, working for a bigger corporation, you probably want to be good at one thing.
Good resources for learning how to put together all these technologies.
The internet?
Google? Have you heard of Google? It's a pretty cool website. That's where I get my resources.
Yeah. There's some really great resources. For example, if you want to learn Ruby for Rails, there's something called Learn Ruby the Hard Way, and that's a really kind of good, comprehensive way of just going through it, and you build your first little web app and stuff.
Another real cool website is called codeschool.com. That's where I kind of started learning and picking up these new technologies. They have a lot of stuff, including some of the top stuff that we did today.
Outside of the internet, meetups are awesome. Meetups are a really good way to meet up with other people who are interested, and generally everyone's super friendly, super willing to teach you stuff. It's also, meetups are also a really good place to do it.
How do you do PHP?
Don't pay attention. There's no PHP. Yeah.
I'm not gonna answer that.
Yeah, Bianna wrote that.
It's marked with a C, by the way.
Marked with a C, so I don't feel.
This one's a valid question.
Is this a question or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Just
Is
like
this
our
plan?
class.
Is this plan? Don't answer.
that's like a whole presentation in itself, really. Basically, what I kind of alluded to was that, so there's been, like SQL was kind of made in the 70s and they assumed certain things, and those assumptions have changed. And that's kind of what spawned, in part, this NoSQL movement. So there's lots of comparisons that you can look up on the internet and things like that. But the best way is just to kind of do your own tests and just write something using a MySQL database and then write it in SQL. And then test to see how fast your queries are and things like that. Yeah, a lot of the NoSQL databases they just are a lot easier to work with. Like we saw how easy it was to work with Redis. Like you didn't need to write a single SQL statement, right? So,
No queries, guys.
but yeah, and then there's also like NoSQL is a very big domain. I mean, there's document stores, there's key value stores, there's in-memory variants, there's even in-memory variants of SQL now. So there's a whole other thing called new SQL. There's a database called VaultDB where they looked at an SQL database and they ran queries and they looked at all the cycles and they saw that really only 10% of the cycles had to do with executing the SQL. And the rest of it was like managing things that had to do with storing the data on a hard drive, read-write locks, buffering, things like that. So they were able to get really good performance by sticking everything in memory.
Yeah, when you build an app, always so the takeaway is that there is a bunch of tools for different jobs. So when you build an app, think about what it requires, and depending on that, you can guide your decision based on SQL versus NoSQL. All right. So for employers looking for Git skills, is it acceptable if you know how to use Git with the GUI, but not the Git command line?
Somebody's been
Oh, we have your IPs. Yeah, good question though.
Depends on if you're trying to be a developer, like a designer, or generally you should know how to use Git on the command line.
Yeah, so Git is a steep learning curve. If you already know like SVN or like Perforce, it's very different from those.
There's also a really good tutorial though.
Yeah.
If you check out, I'm sure if you Google Git tutorial, you'll figure it out. It's online. You can do it online. They've got pretty pictures and stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's called Try Git. Actually, also by Code School.
With a Y, not with an I.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this. 340 to go. All right.
Guys!
How often do we make native mode? Native mode.
That's all, Chris. Okay.
Yeah, I'm the token mobile guy here, but so yeah, we do like mobile is a big thing for sure. Mobile penetration, especially like around the world, is increasing, and even in like North America, more and more people are accessing the internet through mobile devices. So yeah, and
Probably half of our projects.
yeah, Axiom Zen, we like the performance of native mobile apps versus hybrid apps. So yeah, that's kind of what we talked about earlier about having an API that the mobile app can use and any client can use, and you kind of can separate those two.
But as well, don't shy away with making a like foam gap or something just because you know, if you know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but not iOS, that's okay. Do it with foam gap. It's not going to be as good, but at least your idea gets out there.
I'm afraid. Okay.
Okay.
So what do?
We actually did learn Redis from.
Yeah, I did 2 days ago. Yeah, so we did Node, we did Express, we did Redis, we did. So meaning from scratch, as in you don't even know HTML and CSS, or can we assume that you have the basic knowledge of that? Who asked this?
Basic knowledge of JavaScript.
I guess that defeats the question, the purpose of
Right.
the app,
Okay. So yeah, if you know nothing, I don't know, it's hard. But if you have a comp sci degree and you want to just learn Node, Express, I don't know, maybe depends per person, but it could range from 3 to 9 months maybe. Could be really fast if you literally like if your end goal was to replicate this and you learn directed by just learning Redis, just enough Node, just enough Express to build this, it could be done within a couple of weeks maybe.
Yeah.
Next question.
How much programming experience?
How much programming experience did I have? bootcamp down in San Francisco. So I was coding for 10 to 12 hours for about 9 weeks, and after that, I came here. So, I mean, it's hard to say. I was pretty hardcore when I was down at that bootcamp, so I picked up a lot in a short amount of time. But I mean, if you guys are doing CS degrees, you guys easily overpassed me in terms of hours, right? But
So what we look for is not necessarily experience. We look for people with passion, aptitude to learn real quickly, and just coolness in general.
thanks, bro.
Oh,
that's live stream. Did we put them up or not? We can put them up. All right.
next question.
What's some of the perks working at Axiom Zen? Well,
Awesome presentations.
you will learn English. Yeah, what are some of the perks? Well, for me, the biggest thing is just the cool people that I work with. I mean, you just go to work every day and just happy and just fun around. It's almost like a playground. It's not even. You don't go to work feeling like, oh man, another work. It's more like, oh yes. So we have a lot of fun stuff that we always do, and so yeah, we have a ping pong table at work, and we have regular hackathons with cool toys like the Google Glass or the Mayo armband or a Node copter, like all sorts of geeky stuff. If you like geeking out, it's a place to be.
Yeah, pretty much the same for me, and it doesn't feel like work, right? You go into the office. Of course, there are some client projects you have to do, but there's always side stuff that I find interesting, that I'm always learning and picking up as well. And other than work, I mean, we do stuff outside of work as well. We hang out, we have events, company events. It's fun.
But work-wise, professionally, one of the biggest perks that I found working at Axiom Zen is the fact that we take on a lot of different client projects. So you'll be constantly jumping from one project to another, exposed to new technologies. You'll be just learning so much more than if you were to work at a startup that just builds one single product, and your single job is just to keep it running. So that's a big difference that's really important to me.
Yeah, flexibility in terms of like work hours and things like that. We have like the standard like benefits packages and things like that. Lots of different kinds of projects, exposure to, you basically have the freedom to kind of choose your technologies that you want to use and master them. So.
That was very novel.
Is it more competitive to get a job in Silicon Valley than other parts of the world? Yes, for sure.
Really?
I think so. In tech? No.
I got it awesome.
Well, you're awesome.
I guess I'm gonna put some input on this one. I did apply to San Francisco jobs as well, especially in Silicon Valley, but particularly because the bootcamp I attended was in Silicon Valley. So just gauging by the terms of like interview difficulty, it's actually about the same. The companies that I interviewed here pretty much asked me similar technical questions, and they had a similar process. So, I mean, if I gauge it around that like that, of course I didn't like apply Google or Facebook. So I don't know if you guys are looking for those companies in Silicon Valley, but if you're talking about just startups, Silicon Valley and here, I would rank about similar experiences.
Very nice. Wow. What?
Okay, next question.
Do we have time for this?
Next question.
What are the take-home messages for today?
I got this. Okay, there. Actually, I think I did this already. There are totally tools out there that make it really easy for you to get ideas going, to get projects going, to start your own startup, to want to join startups. There's so many tools out there, and most of them you don't learn here. unfortunately. Sorry. But yeah, but that's okay because they're really easy to learn, and kind of with that CS background, you can learn them really quickly. So I think the biggest take-home message is to just do it. Like seriously, just go check out Rails, check out Rails, check out Heroku, and like just put something up there. I think that's the biggest thing I could say to you guys at least.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, definitely have side projects because school just gives you the degree, but side projects can get you the job.
Yeah, and then if you're into like, if you want to do something for mobile, and you're looking for ideas, there's a site called Dribble where designers post UI like ideas, and oftentimes they're not actually a real thing, like they don't exist. So you could just take some ideas off of Dribble and see if you can actually make it happen in an iOS app or something. Yeah.
So how long do we want to keep going?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Does
You
anyone
guys need to?
did you guys have anywhere to be?
There's a lot of questions remaining out.
Yeah. Does anyone need to go and have like some pressing questions that we haven't gotten to yet? No. Awesome. Well,
I mean,
oh.
Sure.
Curious to know, are you guys hiring co-ops for summer?
Yes.
You
yes.
are?
Yeah.
Sam says yes, so yes.
Great, can you tell me more about that?
Our website.
Actually, the co-op positions will be through the UBC co-op office. So either Constance or most likely Constance. So I usually send an email out to the UBC co-op office or the CompSci co-op office, and they send it out to all you guys.
Yeah. Look
So-
for us wherever you find your.
So it will be up probably within the next week. Axiom Zen. You'll see it up there probably, and all the details for the job will be posted there. So the hours, what we're looking for, and the requirements will be all up there.
Because from my understanding, I thought UPC co-ops, you actually have to go through their system, right? You can't just like find a job for yourself
Yeah.
and say that it's a co-op. Oh, you can?
Yeah, anything's possible, right?
Then I
Well,
will.
of course. I just didn't realize that was like about it. Yes.
And it could quite simply just bypass the block and also do a co-op later. All sorts of strange circumstances.
Interesting.
Thinking outside the box, that's good.
But yeah, you'll find us through.
You can talk to me after, actually,
Oh,
if you need more info. Yeah.
you're Sam, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Sure.
Oh, how did you know that?
So you guys want to continue doing this, or?
Oh, I've got a good answer for that one. Have you guys heard of the singularity?
What's that?
Oh man, it's like the point where computers are smart enough to make computers that are smarter than as well. So yes, until that happens. Yes, until we create computers that are smarter than we are, I guess.
How many hours a week?
Well, just to go back on the previous question, like, yeah, information, like the exchange of information has been made really easy and really fast. So I think it's a very exciting field. Like things are changing very, very rapidly. I think it's very bright. It's amazing what is like. It's like she said, like anything is possible, really. If you can think of something, it's probably doable with technology, with computers and hardware, and so I think it's very exciting, very promising. Just have to get rid of those politicians. I mean,
Next question.
How many hours a week? Well, I mean, typical hours are 9 to 5, but everyone actually just stays until like 6 or 7. Not because we need to, but because most of us just want to.
And you could get any late.
Yeah, and you can. Yeah, that's true. It's pretty
Very
flexible.
flexible.
I mean, if you come in at 9:30 or 10, nobody's gonna be like, "Hey, what's
We
going
have,
on?"
we have work from home Wednesdays too, so you don't need to come in on Wednesday, just work from home.
Although most people still go into the office.
Because I don't have a ping pong table at home.
Yeah, I think maybe a better answer to that is we trust each other as adults, as professionals, and like whatever time you need to get the work that you need to get done.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. I think we're done here.
No, that was a good question.
Hi from the office.
Oh, really? Was it D?
Oh, nice.